Today, we're going to take a deep dive into the question of can you retire with a portfolio that has $350,000 in investable assets? Now, I know what you might be asking yourself. How can you retire with $350,000? That doesn't seem like enough money to fund yourself through retirement. With the rising costs in things like healthcare, housing, travel, inflation eating away at your purchasing power, and just simply living life in retirement. And yes, you're right to be transparent. It's likely that $350,000 isn't going to produce enough income through dividends and interest to support your retirement lifestyle. With that said, this $350,000 can provide a great foundation for a long retirement if you plan strategically. So without further ado, let's dive into this example case study. So here we have Jack and Jill. Jack and Jill are both 60 years old and they're looking to retire in the next 5 to 10 years. 5 years obviously being pretty ambitious here, and they're willing to work until the age of 70. So let's go through their plan. Currently, Jack has a W-2 salary of $60,000 and Jill has a W-2 salary of $35,000. We're assuming that this salary increases by 3% per year up until retirement. Currently, we're just using the estimated Social Security numbers. The estimate is calculated by using the current salary and salary increase to estimate the future Social Security benefit. Obviously with the 3% salary increase, that's going to be reflected in the Social Security benefit estimate. Going into their savings, Jack today has a 401k where he contributes 4%. Jack and Jill also have a joint taxable account. They are currently not contributing anything to this account, so we have $0 here. Pre-retirement, they live on $4,500. This is exclusive of their mortgage, which they have a mortgage. So this is exclusive of that monthly payment. This is for, just their needs that they have monthly. Going into their net worth, we can see here that they have a net worth of $722,000. $20,000 in the bank, $352,000 in investments. Jack's 401k with $275,000 in it. Jill has an IRA with $75,000 in it, and a taxable account with $2,000 in it. Their current home, primary home, is worth $400,000. That's the current market value, and they have a $50,000 mortgage. Their mortgage payment, monthly payment today, they put away $1,300. So add that to our $4,500 pre-retirement expense number, and there's kind of their total monthly expense. Going into the retirement goals. They have a retirement goal today. They want to be ambitious of what does it look like if we retire in the next 5 years? Is that possible? So we're going to assume 65 just for the sake of this example right now. They would like to carry that pre-retirement expense into retirement in the amount of $4,500. And then we're going to assume that there's a $10,000 out-of-pocket expense that occurs every 5 years adjusted for inflation. And that actually starts today and goes through the end of the plan. That's just for random expenses that could come up. Maybe it's a new deck. Maybe it's a gift. Maybe, they want to go buy or put money down on a car, whatever it may be. We're assuming a $2,000 every 2-year vacation budget adjusted for inflation. We're starting that today, and we're going to assume that stops at the age of 82, maybe sooner. We're going to assume that they give $1,000 per year away to charity starting today, going through the end of the plan. And we're going to use the annual retirement health cost average here, $6,397, call it $6,400 for each of them per year throughout retirement. Now, Jack and Jill are pretty healthy. Does this average apply to them? Maybe not, but we're just going to be conservative and use this number. For the sake of this example, it is important to note that I talked about a 3% increase in their salary per year. In this example, we are assuming that inflation averages 2.5% per year, and we're assuming that healthcare inflation is at 5% per year. This is reflected in our cash flows that we'll look at with the increase in expenses every year. So let's go into our retirement analysis. As we can see here, Jack and Jill have a 28% probability of success. Clearly, we're going to have to make some changes here. Let's see where they run out of money. We can see here that they are clean out of money by the age of 83. This is kind of a second way of checking with our withdrawal rate. We can see here that the income shortage starts at the age of 83. We run out of that money at the end of our 82nd year. And we can obviously see that this withdrawal rate is crazy high. So clearly they're going to have to make some changes because they're running out of income, and they just can't support everything that they have going on in retirement. Going back to their analysis here, we can see a couple big issues right out of the gate. That is, they want to retire at the age of 65. Again, they're willing to work until the age of 70, so this isn't set in stone. And they're currently collecting Social Security at the age of 67. What does this mean? This means that there's going to be a gap in income for 2 years where they're bringing in no income, but they have the same expenses adjusted for inflation. So obviously there's some changes that need to be made here. Before we jump into that, I want to go into their investments and show you their current allocation. Their current allocation is a 70-30 portfolio, 70% stocks, equities, 30% fixed income, with a hypothetical rate of return of 8.9%. So as you know, as you approach retirement or go into retirement and you're reliant on your portfolio for retirement income, often you get slightly more conservative here. What does that look like? Well, what we can do is we can set up a target allocation. So hey, come retirement, maybe instead of a more growth-focused portfolio, we go into a more balanced, conservative, or moderate portfolio, knowing that we need income from this portfolio. So for the sake of this example, let's just assume a balanced portfolio with a hypothetical rate of return of 7.4%. Now, this is great. We can actually balance back our current portfolio to our target portfolio, and it tells us what we need to do. Hey, maybe we reduce U.S. equity exposure, international equity exposure, and increase our bond exposure. Not saying that this is what you should do, just for the hypothetical example here, if we were to go from a growth portfolio into this more balanced portfolio. Now, what I really want to highlight here is our tax allocation. As we noted when we were going through the profile, most of their assets, pretty much all their assets, are in tax deferred accounts. That is in Jack's 401k and Jill's IRA, with $2,000 in that taxable account. So what does this mean? This means that the lion's share of their portfolio is going to be taxed when they take money out as ordinary income. So is there an opportunity here to maybe move some assets around, or is there an opportunity to start contributing to their taxable account? Let's dive into that. Let's go back to the retirement analysis and let's look at our cash flows. As we noted, today there's a 2-year gap in income, and we will see that here in our cash flow summary. We can see here that we are working from today until the age of 64, where we retire at the age of 65. So in 2030, when we're 65, and in 2031, we have no income, but we still have these expenses. With our goals, that doesn't change. So there are a couple years in here where we're working and we have spend from unsaved cash flows. This just means that we assume we spend this, $17,000, $18,000 here. Is there something we can do instead? Sure. Let's look at maybe actually holding off one of our goals, but then also adding in money to our taxable account. Let's just see how that changes things. This year, Jack and Jill don't need that $10,000 other goal. We're going to hold off maybe until 2030. So let's go back to our profile. Let's go to our goals and let's actually make that adjustment right now. We're going to assume that this starts in 2030 and goes to the end of their plan. Why? Because they're working right now and they have that additional income. We're going to go back to our retirement analysis here, and we're going to actually see how this changes our portfolio right away. Increases our probability of success up to 30%. So we're going to make 2 changes here. We're going to add dollars to our taxable account every year, and then we might also adjust our retirement age until the age of 70. So let's go and do that. Going back to our analysis, we are going to assume that Jack and Jill work until the age of 70 so that they have no shortage of income there. There's no gap in income. Yeah, we could bring this back to the age of 65, but we're just going to assume that they retire at 67 and then collect Social Security at full retirement age. We're also going to assume that they put $2,000 away per year in their taxable account. The last thing I want to address here before we dive into what this does to our probability of success is look at their retirement spending. Retirement spending today is just those expenses adjusted for inflation. So this $4,500 today, adjusted for inflation, 2.5% per year throughout retirement, assuming our end of plan is at the age of 90. Well, usually in retirement, this just isn't all that accurate. What do I mean by this? More often than not, we spend money in retirement in a fashion that represents or resembles that of the retirement spending smile. The retirement spending smile is as follows. Early on in retirement, you have your go-go years. In the middle of retirement, maybe, the decade between, 77, maybe 80 to 90, you just don't do much. And then at the end of life, call it the last 5 years, expenses tend to go up again. This is called your go-go years, your slow years, and your no-go years. In your go-go years, you're going out to eat more. Maybe you're traveling more, seeing the grandkids more, driving more, and just living your retirement life. At 67, presumably you're still pretty young and active. You then hit a period where you don't go out as much. You don't spend as much. You eat less, you drive less. And in turn, your slow go years, you just have less of a expense burden. And then later on in retirement, those expenses, like I said, tend to go up because of, call it, health related issues. So we're going to adjust this to the retirement spending smile. So as we can see here, just by making a couple changes, we went from a 30% probability of success to an 83% probability of success. Now, there is one important thing to note here. I don't want to just make changes to the plan to make changes to the plan to up this probability of success. What I'm more focused on is, given your situation, what makes most sense for you? Do you want money left over in your plan? Do you have legacy goals? What are your long-term retirement goals? And then what can we do here in this plan to help you pursue those goals? So let's go to our retirement details here. One thing I like to look at is, sure, we have, call it $1.4 million in ending assets here. I want to look at what is our withdrawal rate, meaning, is this sustainable throughout retirement? As we can see here, we have a sub, 5% withdrawal rate through most of retirement until later on in retirement. These spikes right here in withdrawals are because of our $10,000 goal, but overall, our withdrawal rate looks pretty sustainable. That is, for the lion's share of retirement, it is under, 6%, 5.5%. So this is good. That $350,000 that we have invested is helping us through retirement with income. For the sake of our retirement income, it is important to note that yes, we have Social Security, but then the way that we withdraw money from our portfolios, assuming we just go with what we have planned for today, is we're going to take money out of that taxable account first. Then we're going to take money out of our tax deferred accounts. That is the 401k and IRA. And then lastly, tax-free accounts if we have those. And we'll explore what that looks like in just a minute. Scrolling down here, the last thing I want to look at is, most likely, we talked about this early on with our investments, we aren't going to have the same portfolio allocation pre-retirement as we have in retirement. So why the allocation difference? This is because we're going to rely on our portfolio to produce income for us in retirement. Therefore, we aren't going to be as growth focused. Rather, we're in the distribution phase of life. We are in the phase of life where this portfolio is no longer focused on growth and wealth accumulation. Rather, it's focused on producing income so that we can take distributions and live our retirement life. So for our retirement allocation, we are going to assume that balanced portfolio. What does this do to our probability of success? We can see here that it drops it to a 76% probability of success, we had about 1.4 million in ending assets. Today we have 865,000 in ending assets. And we can see here that our withdrawal rate actually went up a little, but still throughout retirement, this withdrawal rate looks pretty good. Now, there is one thing to keep in mind here. You've probably heard of the kind of rule of thumb: don't withdraw more than 4% of your portfolio adjusted for inflation if you plan on living a 30-year retirement. And yeah, that is a good thing to keep in the back of your head. But here we like something called the guardrails approach. The guardrails approach allows for more flexibility in our retirement spending. So let's say that, hey, maybe when we're 75 and we need to pull out that $10,000 for that out-of-pocket expense goal, but the market's down maybe 5, 10, 15%. This allows for us, using the guardrails approach, to maybe be a little bit more strategic around how we pull that money out. Maybe we pull it out actually a little bit before or after, just depending on how the market is reacting. We don't just pull out a fixed 4% per annum through retirement. There's more flexibility with the guardrails approach. So going back to the retirement analysis here, the last thing I want to look at is as it relates to our investments and where they are allocated from a tax perspective. Like we said, today, most of our assets, all of our assets virtually, are in a tax deferred account, in a 401k or an IRA. So I just want to go through what we like to look at called Roth conversions. Do Roth conversions make sense for this couple? Now, I'm not saying they do. They may not, but it is a good thing to look at. So we're going to assume that, what does it look like if we fill up the 22% tax bracket? That is, what does it look like if we take money out of our tax deferred account up to the 22% tax bracket and then move it into a Roth IRA? Over the life of our plan here, will it save us more money? And the answer is no. In this situation, Roth conversions up to the 22% tax bracket don't make sense, assuming this terminal tax rate of 15%. Do Roth conversions up to the 10% tax bracket make sense? Yeah, a little bit. We might have $15,000 more in ending assets, but the question you have to ask yourself here is, are Roth conversions worth it for $15,000 more in potential ending assets? Let's look at one more bucket. Let's look at the 12 to 15% bucket. We can see here that doesn't make sense either. It doesn't make sense in this situation to convert and fill up the 12, 22, or even 24% tax bracket. So what this means is we're actually okay where we're at. Sure, we could maybe, save an additional $15,000 if we did that 10% bracket. But again, at the end of the day, we don't want you going through your plan and saying, you know what I did? I made $15,000 more doing Roth conversions. Rather, we want you to live a life well lived in retirement. So going back to our retirement analysis, the main goal here of this video was showing you that a $350,000 portfolio can be a solid starting point and foundation for a good retirement. We can see here that Jack and Jill have great goals in retirement. They're spending the same in retirement as they were pre-retirement. Sure, there's some knobs that we can twist to optimize this plan further. But again, the point of this was, how can a $350,000 portfolio play a role in your income throughout retirement? Guys, thank you so much for watching this. Stay tuned for our next video. Bye-bye.